Hey, in this video I will cover product labeling requirements in the EU. So, brief overview. I cover the basics. That's CE marking, WEEE marking, textiles labeling, and also food contact materials. And I'll also go into details about the practicalities of how to create the label files, how do you make sure that your supplier, well, labels your product correctly. So let's begin with the big one, the CE mark. And I'm sure you've seen this before. Now, the CE mark is a compliance mark that signals compliance with mandatory regulations that apply to that specific type of product. Okay, and the thing with CE is that you find it on electronics, toys, sunglasses, medical devices, and a whole range of different products. Okay, so the CE mark in itself is not it's not a technical standard or a safety standard in that sense. Instead, it just signals that this product is compliant with the CE regulations or directives that apply to this specific product. And clearly, electronics and toys are very different in nature, so different regulations apply. But they all share the one and the same CE mark. And the CE mark should be placed on the product, if there's enough space, on the packaging, and in the manual. Okay, there are a few exceptions, but these are like the basic guidelines. And keep in mind that some so-called CE directives may have additional labeling requirements. For example, if you have machinery, you may need to have the input voltage. Like if you're selling machinery, you may need to have a label for the input and output voltage, just to give you an example. But yeah, the thing with the CE mark is that it's mandatory for the products to fall within a CE marking directive, but it's not a label that you can just put to indicate good quality or something like that. Because if the product is not covered by a CE directive, the CE mark should not be printed on that product. It should not be present in that case. Okay, next one is WEEE, waste of electrical and electronic equipment, and this should be present on the product and indicates separate waste collection and recycling specifically for electronics. And WEEE goes beyond labeling. This is also part of, well, the WEEE regulation as a whole is primarily about national electronics waste collection and recycling scheme in the various EU member states. But labeling is mandatory for electronics. So that's number 2. Number 3, we have textiles labeling. And yeah, it's quite basic. You need to specify the fiber composition. It could be 100% cotton, 98% spandex, 2% something. You need care instructions, and these care instructions must be in the language where you sell the product. That can be quite, well, ambiguous when it comes to cross-border e-commerce within the EU. Well, that doesn't really count as cross-border e-commerce these days anyway. But as you know, there are different languages in the EU. But English is fine, and it's not like there's any like internal customs checks anyway. It should be permanent in the sense that it should either be a nylon patch, for example, or a print on the product or in the neck, for example. But a sticker is not good enough. It has to be permanent. And in the EU, size and country of origin is not mandatory, just so you know. Okay, then we have food contact materials. And this symbol, the glass and a fork symbol, it indicates that the product is safe for food or beverage contact. Okay? Now the thing is that it's only mandatory if the product is not obviously a product that is used as a food contact material. So if it's, say, a drinking glass, say a wine glass or a fork, you don't actually need this symbol, which is, well, rather ironic because that's exactly what you see here. Okay, so if it's something obvious like a blender or a glass or a knife or fork, then you don't actually need a symbol. If it's only if it's not obvious that this product can or should be used as a food contact material. Okay. Right, a few other labels. As I mentioned, there are labeling requirements within specific EU directives, such as low voltage directive. Okay. There are also toy warning labels, and a few of them actually been phased out. Then we have the energy labels, energy efficiency. You find that on washing machines, on air conditioners, and so on. Recycling labels, most actually not mandatory, likely become mandatory in the near future, maybe even by the time you're watching this video. And footwear labels that specify how you have to declare the material of the upper part of the sole and so on. So there are a few other labeling requirements to be aware of that you can find more information about this on the compliancegate.com website. All right. Now, one thing to consider here is that you may need more than one label on your product. One doesn't necessarily exclude the other, okay? So we take something like electronics. You got the CE mark and you got the WEEE symbol. Both apply to electronics. And this may also be the case for a certain, well, it could be a kitchen appliance, an electronic kitchen appliance. You may need to have the CE mark, the WEEE mark, and the glass and the fork symbol, the food contact material symbol. So just keep this in mind that it's not just about finding the one symbol. You may need to have more than one label on the product. Do I need a country of origin label when selling in the EU? And no, actually you don't. Like, unlike the US, what you need to specify is made in China, made in Vietnam, made in the US, made in France, for example. You don't need that in the EU. But of course, you're not allowed to incorrectly label a product. You're not allowed to import a product from China and claim that it's made in Germany or made in anywhere else, for example. Now, this doesn't exactly apply to food products. There are different rules that apply to food products, but that's not really what we do at Compliance Gate anyway. It's more consumer products, e-commerce stuff. All right, so let's summarize this. How do you make sure that you comply with, well, how do you follow a labeling compliance procedure? So the first obvious step is that you need to confirm the applicable products and packaging labeling requirements for your product. That could be the CE mark, Textiles labeling, and so on. Number two, you need to actually create the label files. You could create them in Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop, as long as you create an accurate representation of that label file. If you import products from overseas, then it's not enough to just tell your supplier, hey, you need to make sure that we comply with EU labeling regulations, because they are not exactly compliance experts, especially if you're buying, like importing products from, say, China or Vietnam. So you need to actually create the label, all right? And then you send that label to them. And as I said, it has to be an accurate representation, because they will just take that label and they will print that on the product, okay? And number four, you need to verify that the product and the packaging are correctly labeled before you ship the goods over back to your country. So that's the final step. Okay, if you want assistance with the compliance procedure, go to compliancegate.com/help and we will get back to you within 24 hours. It's completely free of charge to use this form, and as said, we normally get back to you within 1 day. Thank you for watching this video.